Hi YouTube, it's Kathy, Happy Bookmas. I decided I wanted to diversify my look and went in the closet and took something that is my roommate's. And it's cute on me, but it only has one button, so that's an issue. Although it probably wouldn't fit me if it did have buttons, so I'm okay with that. And that's my half-assed attempt into a segue of I'm going to be talking about diversity bingo. This wasn't an official reading goal of mine, but it was something I found early on in the year, and it's a grid of 36 different reading challenges. That's what it looks like. Initially I was really gung-ho about this because I was like, I'm going to read way more than 36 books this year, I can definitely try to check some of these off. But as I was kind of going through and checking things off this list, I realized there was something about this list that bothered me. And I've seen other people talk about the exact same issue. Here's the thing, I am all for own voices representation. I prefer it over other representation, quite obviously. However, there are a few items on this list such as pansexual main character own voices, and main character on the ace spectrum own voices, and bisexual main character own voices. The thing about this is you can't really go ask authors how they identify so you can tick off a box on diversity bingo. And because of this, I slowed down on the reading I was doing for this list and eventually just stopped the reading I was doing for this list. Not because I thought it was a bad idea to do, it just kind of fell by the wayside. That being said, I think I have completed about 2/3 of the challenges, so today I'm going to go through those and tell you what books I used for those challenges. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about the books themselves, otherwise this video will take forever. But in case you were looking for a book that falls into any of these categories, you now have at least one option. For romance with a trans main character, I read If I Was Your Girl. For non-binary main character own voices, I read Girl Mans Up by M.E. Girard. For sci-fi or fantasy with a disabled main character, I read The Speed of Dark by Elizabeth Moon. For practicing Jewish main character, I read Hearvale, How America Got Her Sword. For main character with an underrepresented body type, I read The Upside of Unrequited by Becky Abertali. For neurodiverse main character own voices, I read On the Edge of Gone by Corinne Divers, which made total sense for me to do because own voices was coined by that author. I'm going to include this one, even though I haven't read it at time of recording, but I will have read it by the end of this month. And that's a retelling with the main character being on the LGBTQIA+ spectrum, and that is Ash by Melinda Lowe. For bisexual main character own voices, I've picked Radio Silence by Alice Oseman. Alice Oseman labels herself as queer. Good enough for me on this. For main character with an invisible disability, I read Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. For main character with an anaphylactic allergy, I read Don't Kill the Birthday Girl by Sandra Beasley. For main character of color in sci-fi, I read Binti by Nnedi Okorafor. For own voices Latinx main character, I read They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera. For non-Western real-world setting, I read Maya's Notebook by Isabel Allende. For my free choice, I read The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. For just an own voices novel, I read A Line in the Dark by Melinda Lowe. And with that one, I'm actually making assumptions. I don't know for sure that any of its own voices, but I'm pretty sure some of its own voices. For main character in a wheelchair, I read Ghost Boy by Martin Pistorius. For book by an author of color, I read I'm Judging You by Lavia J. For biracial main character own voices, I read Noteworthy by Riley Redgate. For black main character own voices, I read The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. For LGBTQIA+ main character of color, I read Queens of Geek by Jen Wild. For this one, it's possible that I'm cheating because this might be set in South America and not Central America, but for books set in Central America, I read Fever Dream by Samantha Schweblin. For diverse nonfiction, I read Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. For person of color on the cover, I read Not Your Sidekick by C.B. Lee. For deaf or hard of hearing main character, I read El Defo by C.C. Bell. For immigrant or refugee main character, I read The Sun Is Also a Star by nicolayoon. And for hijabi main character own voices, I read Saints and Misfits by S.K. Ali. If that went by too quickly, I actually have a Google Doc with all of this listed, as well as books I had picked for other challenges that I have not completed this year. If you're interested, I've also talked about all of these books at some point this year in my weekly wrap-ups, and the playlist for that is linked down below. Have you read any of these books? Let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you tomorrow for more Bookmas. Bye!